What up, guys? I just want to talk a little bit about how I personally approach my firearms training. I feel like it's been a pretty popular topic if you've been keeping up with what the community's talking about. As far as like how much tactics actually helps you, how much uspsa is good or bad for you, can you blend the two, and many other things, right? So I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I approach it. I feel like I'm a pretty well-rounded shooter for a few reasons, not just marksmanship or like how fast I am or just purely tactics. I feel like I'm pretty well-rounded. Basically, my approach to this whole thing and my thoughts on it is I come from a CrossFit background. I've done CrossFit for 8 or 9 years now. I was a coach for 5 years until I started training with purpose, and then kind of bled out of coaching CrossFit for the time being. But enough about my CrossFit background. The reason why I say that is because I'm actually an excellent CrossFit coach. And with that, when I trained as a competitor and or as a coach with my competitors, my athletes, I would always save the Olympic weightlifting for the platforms as piece number 2 or piece number 3 that we do out of like a 4 or 5 piece day, right? I didn't just do 5 CrossFit workouts a day where we're just like, today we're doing 100 burpees into 100 clean and jerks at 95 pounds, and then we're gonna do 100 pull-ups and then 100 push-ups for time, and then rest a little bit, grab a snack, and then we're gonna do 1,000 burpees for time. It's not like that. Like, there's actually structure to your training. If you know anything about like MMA or CrossFit, where there's a mixture of training methods to create this one superhuman. You know that an MMA fighter, if you are in the UFC, for example, or training for the UFC, you're doing jiu-jitsu at a certain time of the day. You're doing functional fitness of some sort, maybe perhaps weightlifting at a certain time of the day. You're doing striking at a certain time of the day. Maybe you're spending 30 minutes to 2 hours, depending on what level athlete you are, just doing aerobic capacity, just doing bikes, rowing, skiing, running, things like that. So my point is, there should be multiple pieces and multiple layers to your training, depending on what you want to get out of this. If you always want to be a jiu-jitsu mat specialist, like you're just owning jiu-jitsu mat competitions and you're never scared of a knife coming out in a self-defense situation, and you just want that arm bar, that's cool, that's your thing, have fun. It's America, you can do whatever you want. If you just want to shoot uspsa and just go fucking Ricky Bobby super fast, just fucking blah, 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 that's fine too. That's hella fun. I love doing that. That's so much fun. But there is such thing as training scars. There is such thing as living in one space too much to where it consumes and it kind of shortens the ceiling on what your potential is overall, depending on what your end goal is. Right? Again, if you just want to be a uspsa shooter, that's going to get you really far, but that'll never get you good at tactics. That'll never let you experience force on force and what it's really like to have like a close encounter, whether it's getting to the ground or just having a gunfight in a room or rooms next to each other. Getting exposed to training scenarios, like that are much different than just running around shooting at a bunch of targets that don't shoot back, that you know for a fact you're not scared that you're gonna leave cover and shoot these things. Same thing with CrossFit, you know what I mean? You can't just do bodybuilding all day and expect to run a 6-minute mile and deadlift 500 pounds on the same day. You just can't. So with all that coming together, that's how I treat my firearms training. I hit the gym. I try to stay on top of my fitness, and if I know I'm going backpacking with the boys, which rarely ever happens, but we try to get that going, to test gear and, you know, play with night vision and kind of just run things through the paces in that manner, then I might do 20 minutes on the Stairmaster at the end of a weightlifting session after doing some sort of anaerobic workout, after doing some sort of bodybuilding strength lift, and then maybe 20 minutes just at a solid pace incline on some Stairmaster gets me prepared aerobically and kind of gets everything adapted for the ruck that I'm about to do, right? Because I care about that stuff. If I'm just in the USPSA, maybe all I'm doing is 10-meter sprint intervals with a sled or just body weight. Maybe I'm doing a little bit of explosive squats, explosive deadlifts. That's it. Maybe it's not slow and heavy, grindy, eccentric movement that builds muscle. Maybe you just need to be quick. So I think fitness does play a role in whatever it is that you want to be good at in terms of firearms training as a whole. So I obviously value that a lot, right? As far as the actual firearms training itself, your mindset means a lot. You know what I mean? If you care about tactics, if you care about what gear you're using for being A, prepared, B, for self-defense, for home defense, the everyday carry when you're out and about, maybe you're in the military, law enforcement, maybe you serve, maybe you just shoot USPSA. All these things dictate what kind of training you're doing, but it's definitely mindset. Mindset is a huge thing to think about going into these things. I did a low light course one time with a buddy that is the same level shooter as me, and I fucking smoked a hostage target because I was trying to keep up with how fast he was going. And it wasn't a USPSA course. It was a self-defense, low light, white light type course. So I fucking failed because I was trying to go Ricky Bobby. My point in bringing that up is there's a place for everything, right? If you're like me, that you like self-defense and preparedness, maybe don't do USPSA all the time. I'm friends with the Turner brothers, outstanding shooters. Both of them are good at different things, but primarily they do USPSA stuff. They're also pretty well-rounded with bushcraft and things like that. I know that I like to shoot with them. I have a freaking great time doing USPSA stuff at the USPSA range with them. But I also know I'm gonna always lose. It doesn't matter, I'll always lose. And I have to accept that going into a training session with them, because I'm not running Kydex holsters that are outside the waistband super fast. I'm not running super fast mag carriers. And I'm also not training in ways to where if I fail, it's like, okay, just reset, let's just redo it. Like I'm training in ways to where it's the same every time, and if that means I'm training at 85% speed, so it's the same every time versus 100%, but I know that there's no repercussions other than points for, like, you know, outrunning my headlights. It's that fine line, right? Because you always want to get better no matter what you're into. You want to get faster, you want to get more proficient, but you also got to know where it is that you kind of fall off. I know recently I've been kind of bringing it back to fundamentals because I feel like I had to go back and revisit some of that stuff after doing a ton of movement stuff, after doing a ton of like white light stuff. I've been getting into a lot more NVG stuff. I've been like spending some time by myself doing concealed fundamental stuff. Like I was just hanging out with B-Dub not too long ago from Triple Feed, and he showed me a new trigger thing that I've been playing with. You can always go back to fundamentals, and if you feel like things are starting to feel weird, go back and revisit those things. But I know, my point in saying that is I know with my draw after doing that stuff recently about where my draw time with, you know, draw one shot, I know about where things are not accurate anymore, where grip starts to feel crazy because I was just trying to burn shit down too much. I know about on the time where that is. And these are things that if you take your training seriously, which you should, because firearms aren't like, you know, a toy. Like this is something that you should really take seriously, even if it is just a hobby, because it's a lethal hobby. You should kind of take notes of these things. Have like a notepad or your phone or whatever, and take notes of like where these thresholds are, where these ceilings are on things, and try to like inch closer to being better at these things. But that doesn't necessarily mean there's benefit in having a sub-second draw if you're missing the target at 5 yards every time you do that. Right? And you're also training bad presentation and bad grip and stuff like that when you're trying to burn the fucking house down. Again, going on a little rant. But my point is that you need to figure out what it is that is going to benefit your training the most. I'd have to say most people aren't in it for the competitive stuff. I'd say your average person buys a firearm to protect his home and his family, and every once in a while divvies up for some ammo and does some training because a training event might be fun, or maybe they just want to hit the range as like a casual thing. And if that's the case, USPSA isn't where you need to be going for that. Like I said, I train with those guys every once in a while. I like to do it more often than I do, but I don't want training scars. This is for me personally. I like to revisit fundamentals after so many weeks or months if I feel like I need to kind of redo that. I like to learn from other people, perhaps new training techniques like this new trigger thing that B-Dub just taught me. I like to make sure I come back and I can move well. Personally, I've been finding out that I'm a little slower than I used to be. A little bit of that is weight, a little bit of that is not doing as much explosive training that I was doing maybe 6 to 9 months ago. That kind of stuff matters to me personally in my training because what I value and what I train for. I think everybody should kind of know what that is. Kind of like anything that you do, any hobby you get into, anything that's competitive that you get into, or anything that you value, whether it's a career, figure out what the goal is and inch towards that goal. You gotta find that goal first though, right? I know my goal is self-defense, preparedness. I enjoy all the training that I do, so it's not hard for me to be, diligent about all these training things. I enjoy going out and training with a bunch of different groups, but I try not to get too far off the rails. That kind of sounds like I'm always kind of giving uspsa stuff a hard time, but it's true. There's training scars. There's a lot of bad weapons manipulations, whether it's timer goes off and it's bang, 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 and then you rack it back, catch the bullet, drop the mag, reholster. That's a training scar. If you do that every single time, if somebody comes into your house, are you gonna remember not to do that? To me, that adds more layers of things that you shouldn't be thinking about if you ever had to defend yourself or if you're in a crappy situation. So again, I love uspsa stuff. I think it's really fun. That's one of the layers to the onion, and I only do it so often because you can learn a lot from those amazing competitive shooters, but take the thing that you can benefit from, isolate that, and implement that into your training, whether it's a trigger, like a trigger theory, a method of using the trigger press and the stages of the trigger, or if it's adjusting your grip, going over the slide. I know some uspsa guys do that, or the straight wrist like I like to do. My point is, take the one thing that you can benefit from them, depending on whatever your goal is, and isolate that. That's what I try to do with everything. Like I said, with CrossFit training, I used to always tell people look, dude, you squat 500 pounds, but you need to start doing those running intervals if you're gonna be a CrossFitter, if you're gonna compete, because squatting 500 pounds doesn't do anything if you can't even complete a mile, let alone run a 6-minute mile, which is more of a competitive mile time, right? So same thing with firearms training. You can have a sub-second draw, but if you look retarded when you're running, what does that even matter if you're supposed to be into functional training and self-defense and preparedness? If you can't make it on a ruck with just a simple backpack, then what does a sub-second draw mean? What is that doing for you? If I were to step into your space and try to put my hands on you or your tool, whatever gear you have, how do you respond to that? That's why there's different training methods like that. You can only burn down a paper target so many times before the actual amount of growth, the return on investment is just poor. Like I said, I always try to work with new instructors or go to new courses if they seem like it's something that I can learn from, or some cool dudes. But isolation training is really important. I can't personally say that I think it's good to do uspsa stuff, but I can say it's good to do fitness. That kind of helps with everything. I can say that taking little things from uspsa stuff, like I said, trigger stuff, grip stuff, sight picture stuff, things like that, and implementing that, it's all good. That's how you become this really good athlete if you're a CrossFitter, or a well-rounded prepper, tactician, whatever it is that's your deal. And it goes into a lot of different things. I have a TA Target Steel behind me right here, and I always hear, you need to be held accountable on paper. But my argument for that is, when I ran a couple movement courses over this last year, where the whole course was based on how to move better and how I can help you move better. How am I supposed to help you move better when all you're worried about is how tight your groups are and that you're hitting, a 2x4 card, right? That's why isolation training is important when used properly. For movement, I use C-zone steel in that course. I wish in some of those courses I had a little bit more distance. The range was limited, but the point is that like I was able to focus on the body mechanics of the people I was working with rather than them being concerned with, am I even hitting anything? I've done that before. I've gone to courses where they're like, all right, do a bunch of suicides and then shoot paper, and you don't know if you're hitting shit. You can't hear anything. They're not telling you if it's a hit. And then you're really concerned about your fitness the whole time. And you're just like worrying, oh my God, I'm dying. I'm shooting a gun and I'm dying. I don't think you should do that type of stuff. That's why isolation training is important. Like having like a purpose, having some sort of plan going into training. Like I said, with my movement courses, I think it's the best thing to do to run things like C-zone steel so that you can hear good steel, like TA targets. You can hear, okay, I'm hitting. So in terms of firearms fundamentals, pretty much on. I don't know how on I am, but I'm pretty much on. So I can now focus on my body mechanics, how I'm moving, how stupid I look running, if my strides look good, if I'm tight roping, my kneeling position, if I'm slouching, whatever, if I'm losing my athletic position, if my chin's starting to really dip because I'm like winded because we're moving around a lot. You can really focus on isolating that stuff. And if you're missing a C-zone steel while moving around, you know, when we're working at 10, 15 yards, like, yeah, you should probably be slowing it down a bit and then kind of getting those fundamentals back. My point in saying that is like, there's a purpose for isolation stuff. If you just want to stand there and get your draw better, that's fine. You know, draw one shot, draw two shots, draw three shots, start to work on your draw fundamentals, start to work on your grip, doing multiple shots out of maybe a poor draw, making sure that you have good grip. That all has its place. Don't sit there forever and do that stuff, but that does need to get worked. Marksmanship definitely needs to get worked with paper, not steel, if we're not talking like super long distance where you're just trying to hit steel. Yeah, definitely marksmanship is going to be a standstill. Let's try to like make sure we are hitting exactly where we want to hit at 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 yards, depending if it's handgun or rifle or whatever. So isolate those things, but again, it's just way different. If you're working on movement, if you're working on CQB, it's less about learning how to shoot from the compressed position when you're taking these courses. It's more about the tactics, more about the movement of your body, where it's supposed to be placed, the mindset, the thought process going into these things as you're approaching rooms and hallways and things like that. All that has nothing to do with USPSA. All that has very little to do with fitness. In most cases, I mean, unless you just are talking about mass and not being able to be moved, you know what I mean? CQB is a very slow thing from what I know. Most of that's up here and just practicing good movement, good footwork, making sure that you are in good positions. If we're talking team stuff, there's also like single man, 2-man CQB with like home defense. That's a different thing, structure stuff. My point is you should break all these down individually. That's what I do. I use steel if I'm working on movement. I use paper if I'm working on marksmanship. I use steel and paper if I'm working on like, you know, multiple targets, target acquisition, target ID. Generally, you can use both of those things. My point in saying this is that you should be well-rounded like a CrossFit athlete, like an MMA fighter, competitor, if you want to be well-rounded. Because make no mistake, if all you know is tactics, that doesn't mean you shoot good. If all you know is USPSA, that doesn't mean you know anything about self-defense or tactics. So I don't know, hopefully that kind of breakdown helped you guys, I don't know, open up maybe your thought process on some of this training stuff, like what's applicable. If really all you care about is just like home defense, that's one thing. And there's a ton of things you can go into, but isolating each thing and understanding why you're isolating these things and having value in each of those things is very important. You need to be able to digest this stuff individually. So anyway, I'm here if you guys need me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video.